I don't know. Do either one of your kids swear?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I love it. They're here. Welcome.
Hi.
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 We have both of
I met
you.
Yes, we are
Hello.
here.
Hello.
We were just talking about kids swearing, and I know that you guys can relate. I have a 9-year-old that's a sailor, and he busted me this morning in the car line for using the F word. And I was just sharing with Angela and Gabby that I was waving a car in the car line, and then I was like, oh, underneath my breath, I said the F word. I might have said it a little differently than that, but my kid's like, Mom, I can't believe that you would say that. Here you are trying to be all nice, and then you throw out that word. So
Yeah. My kids won't hesitate to yell at me for saying the word stupid or the word dumb. But they throw around the F word and they say shit. And my son will drop something and he'll be like, ah, damn it.
right.
Like, that's fine. All that stuff is fine. Can't say stupid, can't say dumb.
Exactly.
At least they have their priorities straight.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have 3 boys. So I know you guys each have 2 kids, and I think I'm a boy mom. And then it's like, when you have I have a teenager. So the teenager, the
boy.
way that I parented the teenager when he was younger was so much different than with the third. Because now I'm like, oh my God, whatever. He just said 3 F words in a row, like whatever, and he's like, same thing, dropping something and saying shit. It's like, whatever. He's the third one, it's okay. Like, we're good. The first 2 are good. I think, now that I got 3, we're good. So you guys have 2 boys and 2 girls. So I find that interesting that you guys have that little dynamic going on. Twins and then no twins, right?
Yeah, right.
All
My
correct.
daughters are 9 and 6, and Mark's boys have just turned 5.
Yep.
That's
Just
awesome.
turned 5.
So
And my girls aren't big swearers at this point. I'm sure they will be, but and my wife Sarah and I certainly use colorful language when it is necessary. But and they call us on it. They bust us when they hear it. But soon enough they'll become sailors too.
You just let them hang out with our kids for a little more.
Right.
that reminds me, because I remember when my oldest was younger, and even my middle, I remember my friends with daughters, their daughters were always like sitting and doing crafts and coloring and so calm. And here I am, like running after my boys, like just total chaos. And then now, and then now it's like totally the opposite. Like the girls are, it's like my friends who have girls are like, oh, like, oh boy, and now I'm like, my boys are so chill, other than the swearing and the fighting.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of drama in our house right now.
Oh,
and
really?
it's just I mean, not even tied to anything specific. It's just emotions. I mean, Mark and I talk about it on our podcast all the time. Emotions are high, very high all the time.
I love your podcast, and we met at Podfest, and I was just sharing with Angela and Gabby.
That's right.
And I left your talk, and by the way, you guys have great chemistry in person and on your podcast, and that's why I was like, just bring Mark along, like,
thank you so much.
Yeah. And I left your talk, and which was really interesting because I really wanted to hear about utilizing short videos on social media to enhance your podcast. It was a great talk. You did a great job. And then I left, and because they were kind of shooing us out, and then I came back and I was like, I really just want to introduce myself. So I was like happy that you were, I was able to sort of like hijack your conversation with somebody else and, introduce myself. And I'm so happy that you guys are here. I want to know more about modern dadhood. Like, how did you guys get started on this? Because it's kind of refreshing, like dads don't talk about shit, they just don't.
Yeah. I'll let Adam tell the origin story.
Okay.
But I will say at Podfest, we met a lot of fantastic people, and we met several other folks who have parent themed podcasts, but not a single other dad themed podcast while we were there.
Wow.
I don't think we met a single one that was in the same realm as us.
It's true. Yeah.
I thought that was interesting and a little sad. We're drinking, right?
Yes. Oh, cheers. I have a cocktail.
I saw the word drink somewhere in an email. So
look at that ice cube. I mean, I don't feel cool enough now. I feel like I am like way behind here.
Are you making your own ice cubes, Mark? No, this is the brewmate. That's the brewmate thing, right?
I have the spherical thing. You fill it with water, you freeze it, and so you'll hear some clinks probably.
Oh, gee, I thought you were shipping them by yourself.
I know,
yeah,
right?
I just grab them from the glacier out back.
I'm gonna be on Amazon later looking something up like that. I'm sure I can get that.
It was a gift from my wife for Christmas, and I was pretty stoked about it.
Very cool.
But yeah, Adam does a much better job with the origin story here.
Oh, sure. Well, I've gotten good at condensing it. And to back up just before that, Jozlyn, I'm so glad that you said hello, because like Mark said, you meet a lot of people. But also like networking can be very like awkward. And, I really appreciate it when somebody just sort of, puts the awkwardness aside and just goes right for it, because that's like sometimes those result in some really like great relationships and strong connections. And it was super nice meeting you there. So, and thanks for inviting us onto your podcast.
Absolutely. I think Angela would say that I am Miss Awkward.
I know. I was going to give you an applause, because hearing that from somebody else's mouth other than like the friends that you're usually talking to, it's awesome to hear that, because Joz, she has some troubles with socializing sometimes.
I just cast it aside and was just like trying to be open,
That's
about.
Great. I love it.
So,
and I love that too. I love that too. So to answer your question in sort of a brief way, we started Modern Dadhood shortly before the pandemic. My background is in video production, so directing, producing, editing video. And I was just at this point in my career where I had sold my production company with my former partner. We sold it to a larger agency, and my role specifically became a little bit more managing other people, where my former partner's role became more sort of the creative lead. And so I just felt like I was missing something, and was interested in podcasts. I liked the medium, but had no experience creating them. But since I had this background in video editing, I felt like I had, the basic understanding of storytelling, the basic technical experience. So you're just basically video editing, but taking the picture away. The picture has come back into it a lot just in the few years that we've been doing this, which is a bit intimidating to think about, potentially doing video podcasts, because the real appeal for creating a podcast was that it's so much easier than video editing without the video part of it, the picture part of it. But I'd known Mark for a number of years, and we have always had good rapport and enjoyed each other's company. And when we both had kids, that, as I'm sure you've all experienced, if you all have kids, that sort of begins to dominate your conversation when you're with other people who have kids. You're swapping stories, you're talking about the crazy stuff, the fun stuff, the chaos. And so that theme, fatherhood, celebrating being dads, was just sort of the first thing that popped into my head when I thought, what could I make a podcast about? I reached out to Mark specifically because he has a background in, he's an art director and a great graphic designer. And so I reached out to him first just to ask if he could help me with creating some graphic assets and to build sort of a brand for this podcast before I launched it. And in our first conversation just about the theme of fatherhood and what I was hoping to do with the podcast, he expressed enough interest that I invited him to just join me for the first recording session, with the idea that if it feels good, let's keep doing it. And if you're not into it, then I'll keep pursuing it on my own, like I'd planned to anyway. And surprise, we hit it off, and things sort of just started to take shape very quickly.
He's still here.
Yeah, 81 or 82 episodes later. Yeah.
Well, I remember the conversation really well. I was out in my garage. It was a little bit weird to get a phone call from Adam out of the blue, and so it was one of the ones that I answered. Usually, my phone rings and I look at it and I go, I'm not gonna ever answer this, and I just put my phone away. But his name came up, and I thought, oh, I wonder what he needs. And so we chatted. He told me all about it, And would you do, graphic asset? I was like, of course. Dude, that's such a great idea. Like, I would love in any way to sort of, be a part of it. And thanks for thinking of me, all of the things. And there was a moment where, halfway through the conversation where I think you brought it up right on that call. You were like, would you ever want to be on it and like co-hosts? So, and I was like, wow, that's a different commitment, like than doing some artwork, for it. And I think we left that conversation and I sort of thought, I'll think about this, talk it over with my wife, but then the rest of the day was like, I mean, it's such a good idea. I really want it to be a thing. And I just am thinking like it could be so great. And now it's like all of a sudden it's like, well, now I really want to be a part of it. Like for as long as I can, the idea was just so great, and it just hit me hit me right at the right time. And I think we just talked later that day and was more like, let's do this, like for
let's
real.
Try it.
Let's get it started. Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys did. I mean, honestly, like a lot of times, I mean, my husband, I call him the man babe, and I say that lovingly. And he's, he's still in that pocket of like, don't talk about it, just don't address it. It'll probably go away. It doesn't go away. You know what I'm saying? And it can be frustrating. So it's really cool to hear other dads, and not just you guys share, but also just bring on different guests that like, and I like how you say like famous and not famous and granddads and stepdads and trans dads. And, it's just really, it's like all the dads, like every dad is, you guys bring on as guests. I just find that really interesting and refreshing, because
it really is, Gabby, because sorry.
No,
a lot of, so us women, I mean, there's a lot of memes about it. We usually make fun of or laugh about or complain that our husbands don't put enough work in the household or don't help with kids, but at the same time we're in a culture where that's not really it's not really, they're not really normal, given that opportunity, or it's not seen as normal until they start to see other men start to do it and start to talk about it, and then they're like, okay, so it is okay, so I can secretly like it, and now I can come out and say, you know what, I do like being a dad, and I do like taking care of my kids, and and I'm not going to be the stereotypical man. So it's really cool to see that. Also, I have a question. Have you guys had a lot of men open up to you guys, like, about that?
I think so. I think so.
Privately, like that.
Well, one thing comes to mind for me. There's I live in a neighborhood. There's a bunch of us dads. It's just a neighborhood full of families. It's very idyllic, and we get together periodically, and like on a kind of like a semi-regular basis. And the topic will often come up. Oh, you still doing the podcast? Mm-hmm. Yeah, still doing the podcast. And I don't like to sit, in settings like that and just like plug the show. So it's very like, I still do the podcast, but as chill as I am about it in those moments, like it often leads to a conversation about what's going on with our kids and what's going on in their life, or I'll throw a bone, and say, oh yeah, we just had so-and-so on and we talked about X, and then sometimes that is kind of just enough for somebody to be like, oh man, the other day, and then there's a story there, and sometimes a little bit of a moment. I mean, it's not often that it's like we get super open in instances like that, but even just like chipping away at it, I think is good.
That's so awesome. Yeah. It's like normalizing the chaos, right? I mean, and I think there is like a group of dads, like there's an uprising, where they, they're changing diapers. They're doing half the stuff that the moms are doing, I mean, it's becoming a little bit more normal. And then just talking about stuff, not keeping it to yourself, and just sharing it, because there's got to be one other person that probably is going through the same thing you're going through. And knowing that you're not the only one, that feels really good. Feels awesome. Not that someone else is going through something terrible or whatever, but that not being the only one, it just normalizes things a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah, it that makes me think of actually a recent episode, maybe 5 or 6 back, we had with He is a journalist named Joe Cohane, and he wrote an article. I think it was it the New York Times, Mark, or the New Yorker that we
It was New York
read.
Times, yeah.
It was the New York Times about male postpartum depression, and a lot of what he interviewed many men who've experienced it. He experienced it himself, not even knowing what it was or being able to label it before he began actually researching and doing these interviews with other people. And he wrote this great article, and really what you just said, Jozlyn, made me think of that, because the thing with postpartum depression in men is that there's not enough research about it because men aren't talking about it. So they have these symptoms. There's a whole slew of them, and they just chalk it up to, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm in a funk, I have a period of whatever, anxiety. But if you look at all of these symptoms combined and you spoke to a doctor about it, the doctor would probably say you're experiencing postpartum depression.
Yeah.
It's so under discussed that there is no official diagnosis that can be given. Am I right about that, Adam? Do you remember him exploring that in that article?
Right. Yeah. So there is a chemical component to it that can be distinctly identified in women, and it's not exactly the same in men. Yeah.
And it's
the
one
term
of those,
is used a little more broadly.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those really tricky sort of slippery slope type.
Yeah.
Like, things, because, you say there's like sort of layers of stigma around it, right? There initially, right, just the idea of postpartum depression, period, not like for just a man or just for a woman, but just period. There's a little bit of a stigma attached to that. Then you go down the path of postpartum depression in women, and there's all sorts of stigma around it. There's this idea that as soon as you lay your eyes on your child, you're overwhelmed with this feeling of, joy. And if you don't feel that, then there's something wrong with you, and there's all this stigma there. And then for men, there's that same exact stigma, but then there's also just the stigma of like, oh, you can't keep your shit together, and there's that element to it. And then, there is this added bit to it where we say postpartum, which we just societally generally think women, right? But postpartum just means after a baby, like it just, right? So there's no reason why it couldn't be attached to something that's going on in a man's life as well. So there's just this weird bunch of layers of stigma that makes it really hard to break into, and then add to the fact that dudes generally are like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's stoicism, right? And you don't want to discount the fact that the female is the one who carries the baby and does all of that physical, mental, emotional work, and then pushes a baby out or has a baby extracted from her body. Right. So how can you possibly complain, about being really tired or anxious or stressed out when your partner has just gone through that?
But that's why your guys' podcast is so great. It allows people to kind of, or especially men, to, feel those feelings and be like, okay, I'm not just all in my head about this. There's people out there that are, as we said earlier. I have a question for you guys. Like, just learning about postpartum depression in men, like that's something not a lot of people know about. Are you guys finding yourself learning a lot more than what you ever anticipated?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Absolutely. For me, my whole career has been in video production, and this is sort of just an extension of that, because what I've always said about my work in video is it just puts me in these positions, in places that I would otherwise have no business going, learning things that I wouldn't have access to learn about, asking questions of experts, asking like the dumb questions and not being afraid to, because you're trying to extract that story and put it together so that it's accessible for anybody who, some people may already have some understanding of it, and some people may be coming in knowing nothing about it. So for me, this is just sort of an extension of that. It's using the skills that I've built in video and applying it to this audio format, and then using the platform that we've now created as, we always joke that it's sort of we use it as an excuse to have access to people who we admire or want to learn from. And that's not always a famous person, like a singer that we like or an actor that we like. It's somebody like an astronaut who, who was in maybe our first, I don't know, wow. 20 episodes or something in, I want to say we had a former astronaut and got to talk to him about what kinds of conversations you have with your young kids before you get into a rocket and blast into outer space, knowing how risky that is. You might not come back.
Yeah,
definitely.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge learning experience. And we always say, and we let our guests know this, that we're not really afraid to look like idiots. So, we may ask a question that is dumb or could offend somebody, and please call us on that. We want to learn. We're not afraid of sort of throwing ourselves under the bus or being vulnerable if it benefits the audience or helps to normalize the conversation around whatever the topic is.
Yeah. And I think that's appreciated too, because there's so many podcasts out there that are, they present themselves as the be all end all, I know everything kind of podcast, and you're just kind of like, I have this question, but I'm not sure if I should ask it because you guys are so smart.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not there yet. So it's cool to actually be on the same level as some other people and get those answers that others are looking for.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're dumb answers. I mean, questions. I think
no dumb questions.
No dumb questions.
They're the questions that you should be asking because there's so much information when you have another human being.
Yes. Like Coach Gabby has spoken. I have to tell you, honestly, there's a lot of times I'm driving down the road and I'm like, I know nothing. I really know nothing. I really honestly, I know nothing and I need to learn more from other people because someone else knows something, and I feel like that's my superpower too. It's find someone who knows what I don't know how to do and have them either teach me or help me do it, and so anyways, and then you never know what's going to happen. So
yeah. I feel like we're often, in these positions where, and maybe I'm just speaking, from my specific point of view, but so I work for an agency. I'm an art director at a marketing agency. And so I'm often in the room with lots of other people and we're listening to a client talk about some new product or something like that. Right. And there's all of us sitting there taking notes and I have a question. Right. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to speak up because I could sound stupid. Right. But the probability that of all the people in this room, that there's only one person that's not quite grasping a concept or not quite fully understand. Other people in the room have questions, and they also might be thinking this. So sometimes it just takes that one person to just hold on a second, wait a minute, back up for a sec. You just said what? Can we chip away at that for a second? Because I'm not following. I mean, I've been in that situation too, where I'm keeping my mouth shut. Someone else opens their mouth and I go, I'm so glad somebody asked that question because I had the same thought. And I'm sure we've all been in instances like that.
Yes.
The thing that we try to keep in mind though, is that especially when we're interviewing somebody, and we don't even really consider it an interview because typically it's not question, answer. We say it's an ongoing conversation, but when we are having a conversation with somebody whose fatherhood experience is very different from our own, for example, a trans dad, for example, a person of color whose job is to teach or coach or consult on diversity, equity, and inclusion, teach businesses how to be aware of and embrace DEI.
Right.
We remind ourselves, and again, this is just part of the conversation. It's letting the guests know that we are aware that it is not their job to teach us, but we do appreciate their willingness to chat about it, because if you encounter somebody in person, it is not always comfortable. It can be very intimidating to ask those questions, especially if you feel like it's a dumb question, or it may piss them off, or it may offend them, or you may say the wrong thing. But when you have this little buffer, this safe zone where I can ask this question, and if I'm asking it the wrong way, or they don't want to answer it, they can just tell me that. It just sort of, it takes some of that pressure off.
Yeah.
And our goal is, our hope is that our listeners can benefit from the tools that they are giving us, the language that they're exposing us to that we may not have had before.
Yeah. I love that. And, I mean, it's hard to raise kids, I mean, and like, there's so much, I mean, honestly, like you have to take like you have to take driver's training to get your license.
Mhm.
There's so many things out there that you have to get certifications for. Like, why isn't there a certification for parents? I mean, honestly, like I had no business. And, I mean, like, and I'm talking about outside of the hospital, the hospital classes that you take and the prenatal yoga and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot going on, and that affects the dads too.
Mhm.
It's, I mean, yes, I'm the one pregnant. Yes, I'm the one carrying the child. Yes, I'm the one who's delivering it, and whichever way you deliver it. But the dad is there too. I mean, I remember my husband was right next to me when I was like, had my third, and that was like, that's a whole other story. But like, I remember just being like, oh fuck, and he's just like hiding behind the blanket. He's like, you're okay. You'll be fine.
You're great.
Get her a bucket. Is there more morphine she could have yet? And he was just like hiding. I mean, he was there, like he was experiencing it. So it's great to hear from the dad's perspective. And it's great to have those conversations with other people that can bring to light other things that not everyone knows about,
I love
Yeah.
it. I feel like you guys are pioneers because
Mhm.
we're boy moms. Our
Mhm.
boys will
All
turn
of
into
us.
men.
Yes.
Mhm.
And
I don't
they
even want to think
need
about it.
I know.
to hear this. They need to hear it, that men can open up about that
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
and
have
see other men as examples.
I have a 17-year-old. He's literally a man, like literally a man. Like he's going to be leaving the house soon.
Man,
I know.
I couldn't even begin to imagine. Holy cow.
And I listened to one of your podcasts and you guys were talking about having your kids drive. Just so you know, he already could be driving. He doesn't want to drive. And I'm like, fine, I'm fine because I'm in Florida
Interesting.
and people don't drive good down here. And then every time he gets in a car with one of his friends who does drive, I'm like, are they a good driver? Yes, they're a good driver. I'm like, are you sure? And then I just have to forget about it because it's too overwhelming,
Mm.
And so it was nice to hear that you guys kind of agreed with that. You're not there yet, but soon. It happens
Yeah.
so fast. Like
So
all of a
that-
sudden they're 2 and then they're 17.
Yeah. It just hearing you talk about having to sit there and deal with, I have a 16, 17-year-old, and we don't, I mean, that's your third child, but let's just say, well, that's the first, you said that's
He's
the
my
first,
first,
is it the
yeah.
oldest one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so this is the first time that you've had to sort of think through like that sort of thing. Like that's the kind of stuff that nobody is prepared for, right? And
Right.
I think about this a lot, and it comes up on our show from time to time, that like, you get to the point where you're finally pregnant, right? And then the light at the end of the tunnel is there that you're going to have kids. And you get like so hyper focused, and all of the people around you are hyper focused on like those last few months of the pregnancy, the birth, and then the first few months at home, and it's great that there's a lot of focus there, right? Because it is a major, major shift, right? But I spent so much time perfecting my swaddle,
Yeah.
No
and that,
Oh my God.
that
Damn
time period came and went, and it's cool that I was good at it, but now I have all these other
Fun.
things that I need to figure out how to work through, and I there wasn't that hyper focused.
Yeah.
There wasn't all these people around me going, hey, here's a piece of advice for this, or here's that. It's like it was all centered around that time right after we get home from the hospital. And again, thankful for all of that.
Yes.
But then that fades away so quickly, and then you're back at this sort of like, oh, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And then just rinse and repeat,
Oh
from that point forward, really.
Well, to
When-
make
when-
a good point on your swaddling, I'm sure you can wrap a good burrito.
You know what? I rarely have a leaky burrito.
Yeah,
Okay?
see,
I
there
love
it is.
that,
I
Angela.
don't mean to toot my own horn, but
But you know what?
God.
I was thinking about it too. Is I am actually a single parent. I've been a single parent since age,
man,
it was barely 1, close to 2. So
Wow.
pretty much all of his life, and he's 13 now. And like going on to the idea of you're focused on all this little stuff at first, and then you don't know what to do after a certain point. And as a single parent of a boy, I don't know what I'm doing. Like when it came down to all those questions about
Wow.
personal hygiene and stuff like that, I'm like, as much as I don't want to say ask your dad, you're gonna have to, because I don't know I don't know what to tell you about that stuff down there. So it's interesting to hear, especially a lot of your guys' perspectives on some of the podcasts, because I don't have that, other significant other to give me those kind of, questions and things like that I have no answers to. So
that's hilarious. So my youngest or any of the boys come to me and I'm like, oh my God, that's a dad question. I don't have those parts. Like, I'm not sure. Like, what do you do with that? It's like, I'd be like, you'd have to get on the Google machine, Angela.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I've bought him books and things like that. That's like the only way I can really, answer certain questions is doing my own research and hearing other people's perspectives on it and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
But he's still alive, so we're good.
I mean, so much of this is just figuring it out as we go. And I think that is like so much of life just sort of can be reduced down to that, like fake it till you make it, figure it out as you go, and then build on what you've learned. Mark, when you were saying the swaddle thing, like, I can't remember if we've talked about that before, but I mean, I remember that so distinctly too. It's like, practice your swaddle, but you're absolutely right. Like, after however many months, like, that skill set doesn't really apply anymore. But imagine if before you had kids, you were learning about like meditation, for example, or you were learning about communication techniques with your partner, right? So because so much of that, like those first year or years, you're stretched so thin that like your relationship can become jeopardized, right? Or like you and I both, Mark, and I'm sure the rest of you either are experiencing or have experienced this, like, there are just these moments of insanity where you're like, am I losing my mind? Like, I need to chill out. And imagine if you had the tools, like, to be able to just step away and meditate or do whatever. Just know that you need to go, like, take a walk or exercise for 10 minutes or whatever to sort of reset your brain or lower your blood pressure or whatever it might be. Like, those are the skills that, like, that you can apply for the rest of your life.
Yes. Certification. We need a parenting certification. We need classes.
Right. I think it's a certification that, like, every 3 years you need to need to re-up too.
That's so true. I wish I could swaddle my teenager right now. I wish I could just swaddle him right up.
I think it's called handcuffs. Yeah.
That's right.
A straight jacket.
I mean,
just
honestly,
a lock on the door.
I mean, I'm literally experiencing these moments where we're like, okay, we know that you're going out with your friends. We know that there's drinking. We know that there's drugs. Just don't do the hard stuff because you don't know what it's laced with, like you just really I have this upfront and real forward direct conversations with my kid. Cause it's like, I mean, between my husband and I, we've seen it all, done it all. And like, they're not going to get away with it. And you just can't parent like our parents parented. You can't pretend like it's not happening. You have to talk about it. You have to have the skill set, and that's true. Like with the meditation and the breathing, and incorporating that. Even like I used to pull up kids meditation, for my just to listen instead of reading books with my youngest for a while, and just like breathing, or like, hey, you know what? You're really pissed off right now. You want to help me walk the dogs? Like, let's go for a walk. Or if my boys are fighting, it's like, are you cleaning a toilet or are you doing jumping jacks? Because, So anyway, it's like physical activity when you're pissed, And I didn't grow up like that,
That's a great point that, we're not raising the same kids, we're not the same generations at all, so, being able to get these conversations going, especially for the dads, and learning stuff like that and being able to apply that to this new generation of wild kids.
Yeah,
I'm at 13 right now. These kids are crazy.
Yeah, they are.
Before that, we're okay, but 13 is where it stops.
Yeah, I mean, this particular piece is something that we end up just by naturally exploring a lot, right? Like we're in this position where we're trying to figure out, the best that we can do as parents and teachers and all that kind of stuff, knowing that we have some resources that we can go to. And one of those resources is the fact that we were all kids and presumably had parents or parental figures or something in our lives, right? But you're right. Things were just so different. I'm 41. My parents were born in 1943.
Wow.
Like my parents were a little on the older side, and their approach to, I mean, Mom, if you listen to this, you did great. You did great. I would not change a thing. But like, there are so many things that I look at that I go, man, I would never have done that, or I would never do that, or okay, I can see why she did that, but I gotta update the shit out of that, because just I'm different. My kids are different. The world is so different, right? There's so many variables. And I think, I can't speak from a mom's perspective, obviously, but from a dad's perspective, I do feel like there's this sort of like, you become a dad, and the first thing you kind of go to is you think about your own dad, right? And there's this sort of like, we sort of perpetuate these things that potentially could have been problematic, or not really helpful in the long run. This idea of like, you're supposed to be stoict. That for some reason that is sort of still like men are supposed to be stoic, strong. You're the rock, don't let him see you cry. That for some reason that is still kind of like the go-to place for a lot of men. And does it have to be?
I wish not.
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does.
When I see guys cry, I cry. I'm like, oh my God, stop it. Don't start crying, because I'm gonna start crying. Like, just stop it right now.
I'll tell you, I don't know if I'm not like a big crier, but once in a while, my mother passed away a couple years ago. My girls saw me cry plenty around that, and of course they were very emotional themselves. But there are certain things once in a while where I will become emotional in that way. And I'm telling you, if I'm like laying in bed with one of my daughters, like reading a book before they go to bed, and we start talking about something and I become emotional, like, I don't know if it would be the same with boys or not, but it's just like such a sweet, like, bonding moment. Like, I love that they can see me, be vulnerable like that and express emotion like that, and feel comfortable sharing that with them. And it's hard to describe. The way that they will try to console me is so sweet too. I love sort of observing their reactions when they see me emotional about something. It's really cool.
I had to say really quickly, I'm so sorry, Angela.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, like, you have girls, so you are the man that they're seeing, for the first time. And, and the qualities and the characteristics that they might later down the road be looking for, and so it's such an important job, to be a dad raising daughters. And yeah, wow. And I have to tell you, when I have boys, and when they see me crying, because I might be a little hormonal, and we're watching like a Marvel movie or something, and I end up crying over something really dumb, and they're like, oh, are you crying? She's crying. I'm like, yeah, I'm crying, we're crying, so like they kind of just make fun of me. So it's a little different experience, but sorry, Angela.
Well, I guess my question was, having that kind of experience with your girls, do you remember having those type of experiences with your parents? Do you have, I mean, I know obviously you're not the girl, but in the family, but like, even just having those deeper conversations, because I don't remember having those deeper conversations with my family, but I do have a lot of conversations with my son that I never would even think that I would have. So it's interesting to see that dynamic change over the last couple of generations.
Yeah, I can think of 2 times when I remember my dad crying, and maybe one or both of them, I wasn't even sure if he was like, the first time was when his dad, my grandfather, passed away, and we learned about it via a phone call, and he cried, and I thought he was faking it for some reason. Like, I was young. I was probably like 6 or 7.
Wow.
And
but that
I thought
just shows what kind of persona he had presented to you.
I thought he was almost crying in like a mocking way.
Oh.
And I was like, Dad, stop. Like,
so
stop. Yeah.
Boy,
but no, like, he was mourning like the news of his dad passing away. And the other was when one of my peers, who was a couple years younger than me, was in a skiing accident, and we learned about that, and he cried then too. But no, no, to answer your question, no. And my mother was the same. Like she would become emotional like at our wedding, but no, we didn't really talk too openly about that.
Same.
And I feel
Same.
so grateful that, you know, we're in a position where my family can talk openly about that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so important to talk about stuff, you know, because if you don't, then how are you gonna know? It's like if you don't ask, you don't get, or if you don't ask, you don't know, you know. And I always tell my teenager too, I don't know about you guys, as you know, I'm like, if you are upset about something, be upset. Don't just bury it, you know.
Feel
I don't know
it.
if feel it and then process it and then let it go. I had nobody telling me how to do that, you know, not at all. So
not to keep us in like a too deep of a place.
We're deep. We're in it.
Several years ago, my dad passed away, and we were at a ceremony. We had this. I'll try to make this story short. We were at a ceremony where you like give away, not give away. Everybody gets a butterfly, and you release a butterfly in somebody's name. It's like a thing, and there's like an organization that does it. And so we were at this, and there was somebody who used to be a minister at a church that we used to go to years and years ago. And we were just talking, and this was months after my dad's passing. So a lot of the raw emotional stuff was kind of like, I was what I thought was past it. And I said that to this man's name was Jim. And I said that to Jim, and I said, yeah, I think I'm past, you know, a lot of and I started to talk, and he put his hand on my arm. He just grabbed me, and he goes, you don't get past it. He goes, you can move through it, but you don't get past it. And I was like man, like, because just a really simple thing, a really, really simple thing about, you know, I mean, I'm a visual person, so I immediately pictured sort of like a big nasty thing and me going around it to get past it, as opposed to just going through it. Being mad, feeling what it feels like to be mad, feeling what it feels like to just have a hole in your soul and in your heart, you know, when something like that happens. And there's a lot that can come from that and that process and through that. And that was 6 months after my dad's passing, and he said that to me, and I was like, oh shit, maybe I didn't
got him.
Maybe I didn't feel any of the things I needed to feel, you know. And it kind of started this whole new process all over again. But that really stuck with me, that idea of like, don't go past it, move through it.
I love that visual.
Do you and your sons have that kind of rapport, like where you guys can actually open up and speak to each other?
I mean, my kids are pretty young
still,
and we're working a lot right now. We're still very much in this phase that our emotions are physical. They're you know, they're very physical, and so we're kind of navigating that
jumping
world.
jacks.
Well, it's, you said that about jumping jacks, and I'm like, you know,
jumping jacks.
I pictured it. Yeah, I pictured a time where my one son was just having a hell of a time. I said, we're going out front, we're throwing rocks, dude. Like, we need to get away from your brother, and we need to get away from the house. And we just went outside and threw rocks as hard as we could into the woods. And a minute later, he was turned around.
That's good. That's great that you guys are doing that. We figured out in therapy, a cup of ice and smashing it on the ground is good. You know, not at the house, but like at the driveway. Gabby, you had a question. I know you had a question.
No. I mean, it was just gonna keep us in a little depressing state. But
let's stay there.
Yeah, this is
stay deep.
This
is like therapy.
Say that due to those experiences, you can also like learn a lot. What I learned from my husband is he wasn't always that emotional. There was a time where he didn't show his feelings. I heard this was before me, and it wasn't until he had a son that was 2 and he passed away that he, in that morning, like years after, found that that it was okay to feel. And so now with our son, he's very emotional, and he allows him to feel, and he allows him to just be himself. There's no like, oh, you have to be a man or stop crying or nothing.
Right.
He just
How old is your son now?
Right now he's 6.
Is he aware of of your partner's past? Yeah. Does he ask questions about that?
He has. very simple questions, but yeah.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. So do you guys want to take this into a little bit more of like a fun conversation? Not that we're not having fun.
Actually, I think we should talk about like loss a lot more. No, I'm just I'm not.
Well, I lost my keys this morning. How about that?
Good. It's very
That
relatable.
sucks.
It's relatable though. I lost my mind this morning, so I mean,
hey, me too.
I mean, honestly, like there's this segment in your podcast where you guys talk about like, did I say that out loud? I was like, holy shit, can we talk about this like right now? Because I literally this morning said to my kid, you don't think your shit stinks? Because your shit does stink. You know, you talk shit to your brother. You're lucky it was your brother that you did that to, and he just pushed you a little bit. You do that to anybody else, you know, and then like, but just so I can save grace, the night before when he melted down over Uno and threw the cards everywhere, I kept my calm. I was like, okay, you can go to your room. Now I need your iPad and do some jumping jacks, you know? So like, you know, you have these moments as a parent where I literally question like my choices to be a parent. I was not having kids. Did you guys always want to be dads? Like even before the dad, you know, the modern dadhood podcast, like, did you want to be dads? Cause I was not preparing to be a mom. I was like,
it's a great question.
Mark? I did. Yeah, I did. So I am the youngest of four. Actually, Mark and I are both the youngest siblings and have older siblings who are significantly older. But
more evidence that you and I are the exact same person.
No, we make this joke that like we walk into a room at Podfest and people are like, "Who's that guy with two heads?" Because like we look the same, we sound the same.
What do they say? Same person, different font.
Yeah.
Right. But no, so I in high school and college had young nieces and nephews and got to spend a lot of time with them. And so yeah, certainly from that point on, I knew that at some point I wanted to have kids. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me it was I tend to just sort of like I have a history of making huge decisions with not a whole lot of forethought, you know, like I just, you know, when I met my wife, you know, it was moments had gone by and I was like, oh yeah, we're going to get married. Nice. Like not much beyond that, you know, and then a little while later I proposed, you know, and then we bought a house together and it was a huge thing. And but to me, it was very much like one day we didn't own a house. And then the next day we were like, oh, we're going to buy a house. And it wasn't a lot to it. The same thing happened with, I think for us, became a little bit of a journey because we ended up with, so our kids were, we had to go through IVF to have our kids. And so, but the decision was like a conversation. And then before that conversation, we weren't going to be parents, but after that conversation, we were. You know, I did not have this thought out or preconceived, you know, ideas of one day I'm going to be a dad, you know, interesting. I didn't think about it. And then I did. And then that was that.
That's interesting. And you went through the whole IVF. We got pregnant with my first, like rather quickly. And I was a 0 kid person. So was my husband when we met. I think he had the same moment you had with your wife. He was like, he knew we were getting married before I realized that we were getting married, you know? But we were both like not having kids. And then one day I just looked at him and I said, how can we not have a kid? And I think you guys had this conversation on your podcast. And it's because of our upbringing, his upbringing and my upbringing, you know? And yeah, we don't have to go into the details of it, but it was like, how could we not have a kid? So we decided to have a kid. And because of the first kid, and then I stayed home and other people were having second kids. I was like, well, we should probably have a second kid. Well, then we had challenges. And I was determined at that point that we're having a second kid. And I started the process of getting help and, you know, going through the whole thing. It's hard. It's very difficult. So I shelved it. And then, I ended up having my second, just taking a baby aspirin. So, it was just changing doctors and taking a baby aspirin. It was like the weirdest thing. But I have 2 firsts. So I'm raising 2 boys. They're 2 firsts, you know, because I had one 5 years, 5 years going to school in a totally, like, you have older brothers and sisters, so they have like entirely different lives, right?
Mhm,
Than you
mhm,
probably. And so,
mhm.
yeah. But did you guys want to be moms? Were you guys wanting to be moms?
Yeah, I had it planned out.
Did
You had it planned out?
I had it. I got pregnant October 19th, 2015.
Oh, you're the planner.
I think I'm with Mark in the whole situation. Like, I'm just kind of like, go with the flow, okay, we're doing this, it's happening. Okay, let's make it work, So I think that was it. I'll be completely transparent. Like, it wasn't a planned situation whatsoever. That's probably why I'm single still. So I think that's the issues around that. I think had I had a partner where I felt like we were going to be long-term situations, I probably would have had more. But at this point, no, I think one's fine. I don't want too many baby daddies and things like that going on. So I think I'm good. I'm good right now.
That's funny.
The only reason why I had another one was because of the first. We always remind him that. And then he's always like resentful a little bit about it because, his two younger brothers, he just, the
Needed a
oldest,
partner.
he's just like, ugh, why? And then, of course, like anytime the kids are like stellar, my husband's like, I gave you these boys, and then like if they're like terrible, they're like, why did you decide to do this?
What's up with your kids?
Yeah.
Go
That's
get your
pretty
kids.
normal.
Angela, I wonder if you met somebody and that person had kids and you fell in love, would you be open to an arrangement like that, a blended family like that?
Yeah, and I've been single for 12 years at this point, so it feels like at this point I'm not going to get around a partner who doesn't have kids. Like, I think I'd be lucky to find somebody who is in my range and where I want them in their life, that doesn't have kids. I just feel like it's going to be a thing where I'm going to have to be a stepmom to somebody's kids, and I'm okay with that. I love kids are great. I actually, before you guys got on, I started a new job this year as a children's literacy tutor, so I get to hang out with other little kids at this point, so it's kind of fun. So I'm cool with kids. I'm cool with other people's kids, so I think that's something I would be open to. It's not something I would push away.
That's a really good question. You guys already answered my what do you do during the daytime, job question. So art director and working for a marketing firm, and then you work in the video production and stuff like that. So like obviously podcasting satisfies your own personal, I know we're gonna wrap things up, but like your own personal, like artistic and creative like place, because that's kind of how I fell into podcasting too, and how we all came together to podcast. And so like from a creative standpoint, from video production, you spoke a little bit about this at Podfest about like using short clips of videos and stuff like that to enhance your podcast. But like, I don't know, I kind of want to pick your little brain out, not little, your brain about,
you can pick my tiny little brain.
I've seen his brain. It's pretty tiny.
It's actually embarrassingly small.
No, but I mean, we talk to creatives, and we are all creatives here, so it's like from a video production standpoint, like I would want to ask you, like, what are, where are you at in that realm, like, and, share with us, like, is it really make a difference when you're working with like talent? Like if somebody has like a certain kind of mic, I mean, Gabby and I talked about this. Your guys' sound quality for your podcast is amazing. Like, do your eyes light up when you see like a talent has like a specific setup in terms of equipment? I'm just curious.
It's a great question. And whether it's, so with video specifically, I mean, when I got into this world, in order to do something that had high production value, you had to invest 10 grand or 20 grand in a really great cinema camera and lights and audio equipment. And 15 years later, everybody's carrying in their pocket a phone that captures video that's significantly better than what that 20 grand could buy you back then. And audiences standards, because they're used to seeing content captured on a smartphone, their standards have lowered. It's more acceptable, so that in some ways makes it a bit harder. It's harder to sell somebody on investing money and doing something really good. But that's just one piece of it. I mean, when it comes to podcasting is still very much kind of the Wild West, I guess, to use that sort of cliche term, in that there's a very low barrier entry, right? Anybody can start a podcast. It's very easy to get it onto Apple and Spotify, and there are really no standards for it.
Yeah.
You know, you can license a piece of music to make a theme song very easily. You could record it on an iPhone if you wanted to, or you can invest money in your equipment, and you can use a professional mix, you know, a sound mixer. You can outsource that and create something that sounds really polished and professional. For me, my standards are high because I come from a world where I was trained to create stuff of high production value.
Right.
But I think what I've learned in these few years of podcasting is if you've got a good story and people are interested in what you have to say and what you're doing, you know, maybe it doesn't need to sound amazing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing there about that because I've heard podcasts that just sound horrible and I will turn them off because I can't understand what's going on. I'm like, I don't like it. Nope. Yeah. So I think production and like the quality of your sound and things like that, I think that has a lot, you know, maybe like 70% of what's going on in the podcast, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important too, obviously, because we do put a lot of care into our podcast, but you know, it's a spectrum, and maybe 70% is that threshold where, you know, if it's 70% good and the story is really strong, you're going to build an audience. But if it's 60%, that's the point where people are like, I can't listen to this. It just doesn't sound good. What drives me the most crazy is when it's just totally inconsistent, either like loud and then soft, or you've got two or three people and everybody sounds completely different from one another. That's the stuff that really kind of gets on my nerves.
Absolutely. And I feel like, especially everybody on this chat right now, you know, we have the ears for it already. You know, we've been listening to our own sounds, and, you know, Joz and I have radio background. So like we've been doing this for years and we can hear it. So the minute I hear something that's not, you know, next. Next, exactly.
And I do think, like, I agree with Adam in that, generally speaking, like some standards have lowered for but the access to whatever it is, right? Like the access to music, the access to podcasts, the access to movies and TV shows and this, that, and the other. It's so much more, like there's so much more of it, right? And it's so easy to get. Like we can go on YouTube, you go on YouTube 10 years ago or whatever, and it's like, what the hell am I looking at? You go on YouTube today and there is like, I mean, like $1 million production value stuff going on at the click of a button, right? So like people have kind of, I think this was what happens with podcasts. There's so many, and we now have been tuned a little bit for specific types of quality, and we're going to ignore, you know, something that doesn't quite. So it's this weird sort of like dichotomy of like lowered standards, but then there's the baseline for tolerance, I think, is higher. Because it seems like shouldn't be that hard. You know, because I can turn on YouTube and see somebody create this amazing, almost like cinematic experience in their house.
Right.
You know, and
with
so
their
it feels
phone.
like, exactly. And so a lot of it feels like it's like you should be able to produce something that's of a particular caliber. So to me, I think of it as like this weird sort of dichotomy of like a lower standard but a higher baseline of tolerance.
That's
interesting. Can
I ask
your
go ahead. No, you go.
I was just gonna say, Mark, can I ask your perspective on, like, I mean, right now you have all these different like phone apps that can do graphic design, like with the Snap. Like, how do you feel about like the production value of those things?
Right. That's a good question.
Do you guys want to hang out for another hour?
You need a refill?
Hold on. No, I mean, it's no, I honestly, I'll say it this way. I kind of fight a little bit of a battle every day because of stuff like that. Because even people around me that I would consider like people on my own team, sort of, they see these things out there and they say, that's what I want. That's what we should do. We should be able to do that. You know, but I have the eye to look at things, and I'm sure is exactly the same way. You know, you see the things that other people can't see, or the stuff that's behind the scenes, or what led to this end result. You know, and so I have to think really pragmatically, and I have to think, I'm dealing with a budget, I'm dealing with a timeline. I'm dealing with a certain set of assets, or a particular set of resources. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, there's a time and a place for Canva, for example.
I
We've
was
probably all
going to
heard
say
of
Canva.
Yeah. I'll admit that there's been times where I've said to clients, like, I think we should probably just use Canva, because of all of the parameters of the thing that we're creating and what the end result needs to be and whatnot. Now I'm rambling. I told you.
You're good.
I told you.
love
I knew this would
rambling. No,
happen.
it's good.
I guess.
Yeah.
I want to bounce off.
That baseline
Yeah.
from different professionals. Where do you think it should sit, or where do you think it's out of hand?
Yeah. It's just so there's so many variables.
Right.
Totally. And I asked about the audio because it's like there's like the voiceover and on camera, everything is so accessible, right? So you can audition from your home, from your bathroom with your phone, with like a light or just the light from the window, or when you can have a booth in your house, and it's so saturated in the voiceover world that like I'm getting word, and it's coming up that like you have to have really good audio quality because otherwise you're not going to be competitive. And then back to the Canva thing, like for podcasting, like I don't like faces. I don't want to see your face on your artwork. Like just have some really good artwork. And please, with the font, I need to read it. Like I need to be able to read it. It's this
Never
tiny.
sacrifice readability. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just opened up a couple cans of worms. You're
welcome.
No,
something that comes to mind. Like, so now I'm thinking about all the because there's a YouTube tutorial for anything. If you want to learn something, you can put it in search for it on YouTube, and you can find some people telling you how to do the thing. Yeah. Right. And so with audio, right, there's plenty of examples of hacks, or setups that are affordable, the budget setup, to sound like a professional, blah, blah, right? We've all seen these kinds of things.
That's pretty good.
As easily, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
Yeah.
I think it's smash
the like button. Right. Sorry. I think that here's the thing though, at the center, you still have to have a good idea, right? You can hack your way through a good sound. You can like, and this is the thing that I deal with a lot in my professional world is that, yes, we could just do the whatever to make the thing, right? Yeah. But like at the end of the day, like what you're paying me for, what you're paying my agency for, or what makes our podcast, I think, worth listening to is at the core of it is a good idea. And then some people around that idea that believe in it and that have a little bit of passion and that have a set of values or an ethos or a mission, whatever you want to call it, from which you're moving forward. So I think that's the real nugget, that you're not going to get a nugget like that from a YouTube tutorial. You're not going to get a nugget like that from a very expensive microphone. You know what I mean? So
yes,
that's all. No, I'm done.
Agreed.
Adam, did you want to ramble a little bit before we end?
I was just gonna say, I get overwhelmed even as someone who creates content. I get overwhelmed by, we could take this hour-long conversation and dice it up 1,000 different ways and create 1,000 different pieces of content that promote the episode, that promote, keeping up chaos. But like Marc said, at the center, like you still need to have something of quality, something that was created with care and purpose and a goal, and that's what is kind of being threatened by all of these new, AI tools, for example.
Yes.
What I don't want to lose about our podcast is the fact that, we're trying to have these genuine, authentic conversations with real people and learn from them and gain new perspective and grow, Marc and I to become better parents, and for our audience to gain that knowledge and become better parents too. And, I don't think there's something intangible there that can't be replicated with Chat GPT.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Yeah, that was an interesting, going back to Podfest, that was an interesting track that I went and sat with and listened about. I'd never heard about, I had no clue. And then somebody else brought it up, and then I saw that I listened to the guy that talked about Chat GPX, or I always say that wrong. My teenager's like, "That's wrong, Mom." And I'm like, "Ugh." But it's interesting. You can literally come up with like a whole book, and then there's a whole other AI that can, do all the artwork. But you're right. There's not like that
human
human. Yeah, the human. Yeah.
I've experimented, not to go down a whole nother path, but I've experimented a bunch with Chat GPT, and it's very cool. It's very interesting. It's definitely, there's a wow factor there, and there's a bit of like an awe quality to the whole thing. But there really is this, it doesn't feel right. It's a really hard thing to explain. And I've done it, I've given prompts like, I have an idea for a blog post. So I'll write a bunch of prompts and I'll just say, like, write me the post, and it'll do it, and it's very interesting because and then it'll write you a blog post, and then you'll say, do more of this in the post, and then it'll rewrite it. And you can really sort of shape and mold and kind of but every time at the end of the day with something like that, which is, again, it's like we're talking about something that needs to have like an idea at the center of it, needs to have a POV, attached to it. And humans are what write ideas down and publish them out into the world. And it's humans that absorb them. And there's something, it really feels not quite complete. It really feels that there's no human at the center of it. And it's humanness. It's hard. It's kind of hard to really describe other than saying it doesn't feel quite right.
Computerized.
Yeah.
One of these days, I hope we are not having a conversation where we're in the Matrix and the computers and has taken over.
We're already there.
I mean, we could be there.
I know we could not even know.
None of us are Neo, I don't think. How would we know?
I mean, well, to tie that all back into parenthood, like all of our kids are growing up in a world where that's only going to exponentially become more prominent. And that's like, for me, that's kind of a scary thing, but it's also a really interesting thing. And I'm just so curious to see in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years what that looks like.
Honestly,
that's how our parents felt with cell
night.
phones and all the computers and stuff. Our parents were like, internet? What?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's gone to a whole nother level though. And that's like a whole nother podcast too, because I mean, I'm kind of at a point now where I'm like, do not make me a grandma. I am not at the age that I need to be a grandma. And I'm also like, maybe we should I'm like, maybe I don't need to ever be a grandma. I know that sounds controversial, but it's like, I don't know where we're headed. The world has gotten really weird, and I know that's really controversial, but I will just throw it out there. I just
agree with you.
It's kind of crazy. I'm so happy that you guys came on. We'll just end on my little crazy thought there.
Perfect place to end.
Gabby, did you have
such
one
a pleasure?
Yeah, it was so nice to talk to you guys again. Actually, have a little more time with you, and actually, be able to chat with you a little bit, Mark. And I like I said, I really enjoy your podcast, and I'm glad that I found it at Podfest. And I'm glad I've been able to listen to some of your episodes, and I really like what you guys are doing. I think it's cool.
Yeah, keep it up, guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. We will. And you keep it up too. Your podcast is great. And I'm looking forward to spending more time with it.
Thank you. You guys, how can anyone else find you? Let's do the thing. We gotta do the actual thing.
We're usually the ones asking for the other people to do the thing.
The tables have turned.
Yeah. Adam, take it away.
Well, we've got a website, moderndadhood.com, which is basically a hub to everything. But, you can search Modern Dadhood on all the major platforms, Apple, Amazon, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere.
Awesome.
All of the episodes are available on our website. What else? What else do we say in the closing of our show?
We're on Instagram and all that kind of crap, but we are putting a little bit more effort, I'll say, towards YouTube. I think you might see some more content from Modern Dadhood on YouTube in the coming weeks.
It's
and
awesome.
So
I have to say, if you guys are bringing on dads, I know you are talking about Ryan Reynolds, and I know that he's, but I mean, I'm just gonna put in the hat.
Do you know him?
I wish.
Okay.
Jason Momoa, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, he's a stepdad, right? But like that might be an interesting conversation. And if you're on
how
YouTube,
intimidating would that be?
Another dreamboat. That's the problem. It's just another dreamboat. That's the issue.
We refuse to bring on guests who are just going to make us look like just ugly.
Yeah.
It can't be the center of attention.
Yeah.
But no, he would be an awesome guest. I would love to talk to Jason Momoa.
I've read just a little bit about some of his philosophy around the idea of being a parent and that kind of stuff. And it is very intriguing. I think he's a great dude to have on a wish list.
Yeah. I love your wish list. That was really funny. All right. Thanks, guys. Hang tight for 1 second.